Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie has issued a statement this evening. He said the developer of Baha Mar could have never opened the Baha Mar property. He says the government's decision to move for provisional liquidation of the Baha Mar companies in the Bahamas was the only sensible option available and was manifestly in the interest of reducing harm to the Bahamian economy and Baha Mar's Bahamian employees and other creditors. Any suggestion, the statement says, to the contrary demonstrates a lack of awareness of the facts surrounding Baha Mar's insolvency. Recent press accounts critical of the government's decision suggest that the government should have committed $100 million in taxpayer funds to supplement financing ostensibly available from Baha Mar's construction lender, the Export-Import Bank of China, and its developer Sarkis Ismerlian, the statement explains. It goes on to say that this criticism ignores a critical fact. Provisional liquidation of the Baha Mar companies was the only realistic choice following their surprise Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in Delaware in late June 2015. The statement adds the developer himself in the U.S. bankruptcy proceedings made clear he had no money to complete the project and that he had every intention of downsizing. The statement continues, in its evidence in the Chapter 11 proceedings in Delaware, the developer acknowledged that in the absence of further funding from EXIM, funding for which there was little prospect, it would be compelled to downsize their operations, including archiving a substantial portion of their current property and reducing their workforce to a skeletal staff necessary to minimally maintain their resort assets. The skeletal staff, the statement continues, was expected to number only 52, a reduction of almost 98% in a workforce that had numbered 2,400. As the government recognized in the weeks following, the statement says, the Baha Mar bankruptcy filing and as subsequent events have confirmed, the developer, the construction contractor, China Construction, and EXIM were locked in incontractable disputes. The cost of completing construction and opening the resort, the statement continues, was expected to be at least $600 million. Now, EXIM disclaimed any obligation to provide additional financing beyond the $2 billion in loans that it had already made. The Baha Mar companies themselves had almost no cash, the statement says, and the developer, despite grandiose claims to the contrary, had no prospect of attaining additional financing from any source other than EXIM. A continuation of the Baha Mar company's Chapter 11 bankruptcy cases in Delaware would have prolonged the developer's control of the Baha Mar project at the cost of tens of millions of dollars of professional fees. But it could not possibly have changed the outcome for Baha Mar except for the worse. The statement adds, by commencing winding up proceedings and moving for appointment of provisional liquidators, the government preserved the possibility of a negotiated resolution while assuring that the fate of the Baha Mar resort and the claims of its creditors would be determined in the Bahamas, not in a bankruptcy court in Delaware. Now, the statement adds that this measure, among other things, saved Bahamian unsecured creditors the cost of pursuing their claims in the U.S. Critics of the government's decision, the statement says, have suggested that the Baha Mar Chapter 11 proceedings in Delaware were analogous to the resort's international bankruptcy proceedings that affected Paradise Island back in the 1990s. But the Baha Mar proceedings differed sharply from the two resorts' international bankruptcies. Now, the statement goes on to say the properties on Paradise Island, controlled by Resorts International, were part of a much larger enterprise which included casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The Resorts International bankruptcy affected holding companies and their creditors and led to the sale of the Paradise Island properties to Sol Kerzner, but did not jeopardize the Bahamian economy or the interest of Bahamian employees or other creditors. The statement goes on, by contrast, the Baha Mar project constituted virtually the only material asset of any of the Baha Mar companies, whose connections with the United States, let alone the state of Delaware, were minimal, while the Baha Mar company's bankruptcy threatened to harm and has gravely harmed the Bahamian economy and Baha Mar's Bahamian employees and creditors. The statement adds the government remains committed to working conscientiously with all relevant parties to secure the completion of the construction and the opening of the Baha Mar Resort in the shortest possible time, having paramount regard at all times to the interest of the Bahamian people. Now, the Progressive Liberal Party chairman, Bradley Roberts, has chimed in, also issuing a statement saying Hubert Ingraham is dead wrong on Baha Mar and his views are dangerous to our sovereignty. He said Mr. Ingraham's ill-advised comments on the Baha Mar bankruptcy process prove yet again that failing to stand up for Bahamians and the sovereignty of the Bahamas must be endemic in the FNM. When faced with the decision to stand up for the Bahamas, Roberts says the leadership of the FNM always waffles and struggles on that score. The decision of the Christie administration, he says, to oppose the subjugation of our sovereign jurisdiction to a foreign one, reducing our judiciary to a rubber stamp, was a matter of sovereignty, and we stand behind the government on this policy decision. He adds that the presiding judge in the Delaware Bankruptcy Court and the Bahamas Supreme Court agreed with each other and the government of the Bahamas. What Hubert Ingraham is suggesting, Roberts says, in the media sets up a dangerous precedent, and it will undermine the sovereignty of the Bahamas if he or the FNM have their way in the governance of the country. He adds that Mr. Ingraham's conflict is really with the Bahamas courts, as no decision regarding Baha Mar is made without the approval of the Bahamas Supreme Court, but he deceitfully misleads Bahamians on the Baha Mar issue.